All right, so here we are for another AfroComicCon panel, and this time we are talking about concept art. And with me is, of course, Michael BUffington, the concept art lead for here at the Academy of Art University, who is a graduate of the Academy, but has worked with Lucasfilm and worked on video games and worked in CG and has worked in some of the bigger concept art houses, you would say, or we'll get into that aspect of it. And also, of course, we have Kalen Chock. Kalen Chock is a visual development artist, a concept artist who's worked with clients such as Ember Lab, Autodesk, Virtual Toys, and he is an expert in all things concept art as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Michael, to kind of give us a run through on just what's the concept of concept art.
Well, one of the things that that you'll find is that a lot of people, coming up and developing their skills really like to draw and they really like to paint. They might like to design characters or creatures or something like that, but they're not sure how to take those skills and those interests and turn it into a viable career. And so when they go to their parents or they go to whoever their support network is and say, hey, I really like to draw and I really like to paint. That's what I'm really passionate about. I'm not so passionate about being a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor. A lot of times the responses that they get is, well, how are you going to make a living doing that? How are you going to make a career out of that? Is it even possible? And are you going to be able to support yourself or a family? And so a lot of times people get discouraged because they really don't know what type of careers exist where you could make a living drawing and painting cool monsters and characters and creatures every day. And so that is what we're going to discuss today, which is the career of being a concept artist. It's something really cool. And I got myself and my good friend Kalen on here. Both of us are industry concept artists. And we've been able to make a really good living doing that. And so we're here to talk to you about what it is and what it takes to become a concept artist.
So briefly, though, because concept art is a big term, what is not concept art? So if concept art, and we're going to get deep into it, but what's not concept art? Is this where you're creating a character and you're creating this one giant dragon monster, or is it something different?
I'll bounce that over to Kalen. What do you think, Kalen?
In terms of concept art, I would probably think the best way to describe it is the value of it. So if you want to maybe talk about maybe the difference between illustration and concept art, in illustration, the value is in the painting itself, meaning that once you finish the painting, you could sell it as like a poster, you can make prints of it, the value is in the painting itself. You get paid for that and it's done. In concept art, the value isn't necessarily in the painting itself. It has to go through a process. So though you may do a piece of concept art, you couldn't necessarily sell it, though nowadays artists are getting really, really good and everything that they draw could be sold and be hung up on a wall for stuff. But usually concept art it's a one word and a part of a longer sentence or a paragraph that's leading to the final product, meaning that that concept art will help the animator or help a modeler, a visual effects artist. The value is in what it kind of leads to, not the actual drawing itself. And I think that's kind of a big misconception between concept art and illustration. People get into concept art thinking that, oh, I'm just going to draw nice pictures. And though that is part of the gig, a lot of it is figuring out how does your art help communicate ideas to the rest of the team versus an illustrator will just be drawing a nice picture for the sake of drawing a nice picture. So that's kind of usually how I explain it to our students.
So then concept art is not a one-off. It's not a one thing, wash your hands, move on.
Yeah, it's usually like a very iterative process, meaning that you're going to do multiple drawings. So a lot of times when I'm working with my art director, it's never just draw one piece. It's going to be drawing things at different angles, explaining materials, explaining the overall forms. We call it, I guess what I would call it, visual communication, right? So how do we communicate this idea visually to get it through the pipeline of the final product, right? So a video game or a movie is not just concept art, right? It's a moving 3D model, usually, that kind of stuff. Well, concept art helps kind of get that part, kind of helps start that off to get to the final product. So a lot of it is back and forth. It's a very kind of team oriented kind of situation where you're talking with your director, you're talking with your UI artist, you're talking with your animator, trying to figure out how can my art best assist you to get things visually. Because a lot of times people in the team, they don't have the drawing ability that we have, but they have an idea in their head, they have something they want to figure out. Our job is to kind of take what we think is in their head and try to draw it on paper. That could be from a script, from just what they're telling us, that kind of stuff. So our job is, again, to visually communicate their ideas on pen and paper or a digital canvas.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with everything that you've said, Kalen. And it's the way that I liken it too is, or when I try to explain it to my students, I tell them that we are professional visual problem solvers. In other words, we're presented with a problem, which is your design brief. So here is a game designer or the producer or whomever, and they come to you and say, hey, I have this idea for this character or this environment for the game or this prop or whatever the asset is. They have an idea and they have something in their head, but they don't know how to articulate it because, like you said, they don't have the same drawing or painting skills that we do. And so they come to us as concept artists because not only do we have the drawing and painting skills, but beyond that, we have the analytical and problem solving abilities to be able to use the four tools, which are line, shape, value, and color, and put them together in such a way that it really articulates what they're trying to get across to us. And so, we did a whole talk previously on sort of what it the game development pipeline and things like that, and you're absolutely right. Like, our value as concept artists to the process of making a video game is that we create the visual imagery, the mood, the aesthetics, so that people further down the pipeline, like the 3D modelers, like the animators, can take what we've created and then put it in game and make it work and make it playable. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I kind of call it like a like you said, I call it like a visual kind of puzzle solver, or I even call it like art firefighter. When people ask me what I'm doing at work, like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm putting out art fires." That to me means like, hey, the UI artist doesn't know what this could possibly look like. What should we do, right? And the
Right.
weapons artist comes and says, "Hey, we need an idea for a weapon." And then the environment artist is like, hey, we need a new region we got to figure out. And so I just kind of call it putting out art fires. So though the artist could probably do it themselves if they really, really wanted to, that takes them away from their tasks. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so my job is to kind of make sure that everyone is running on all cylinders so that anytime they need something visually explained to them, my job is to get it off to them so that way they can start doing what they need to do, versus them having to take time away from their tasks to then figure something out visually. So it's kind of like a firefighter. You're putting out multiple fires at a time, trying to make sure that everyone is good with the visual aesthetic. And then obviously you have your art director and your lead artist making sure that whatever you're doing visually is staying consistent throughout the entire project, because you want to make it seem like it's all done by one artist in a sense.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, an art firefighter. I love that because it's really what we do. People come to us with these huge problems, and we have to figure out how to deal with it or how to put out that fire, as you put it. And it's super. I mean, it's super important what we do, and that's kind of why concept artists oftentimes, maybe more than any other role within sort of the game development pipeline, become like the rock stars of sort of that whole experience, because we create the images, we solve the problems that almost anybody else within the pipeline doesn't know, doesn't have the time, or maybe not even the skill to solve. So it's a very important function for the game, and so I think that it becomes a very critical part of the process, and it's something that you really can't do without. And that's not to say any part of the game development pipeline is you can do away with it. Every part is indispensable, but you really need a specific type of artist to do concept art. That's why you can't just be an illustrator or just be a fine artist or just be a comic book artist or just be good at drawing or painting. You have to not only be good at all of those things, but you also have to be able to problem solve and be very analytical in the way that you design and create things because you're working as a part of a team to solve problems and, as Kalen put it, put out those art fires.
Kalen, I've got a question for you, and Michael too. Kalen, you had said that you're working with other artists, so you're not the only artist on a team. You have the character artist, and then the art you create has to match their style. How do you guys, as concept artists, work with, say, the character designer and the art director? How does your role fit into that style hierarchy, if that's a thing, or into that world of visuals?
I mean, every team is different, but that usually heavily relies on the production designer or the art director. Um, I always use sports analogies, but think of them like the basketball coach. They kind of have the ultimate strategy of what we're trying to do visually. And then, us as artists, we're the players on the field trying to implement the strategy. So our art directors usually are the people that let you know, hey, you're drifting too far off, left of the field. You need to play center. Everyone has their certain role, and a good art director will usually play to your strengths and also play to with people that you work well with. So sometimes your art director will make sure that you work along somebody that you get along with and that you create good work with. Because a lot of times you're not even doing the work 100% by yourself. Sometimes you're doing a painting and then you have to kick it off to somebody else to help do the rest of it because they're really good at one aspect of it. So for me, like I'll do some environment sometimes, but there have been some times where I'll do an environment, but our character guy is like, hey, we want the character guy to put the characters in your environment. Can you kick it off to him? And I kick it off to them, and then we kind of collab on the lighting and stuff like that. So that can happen very easily, but a lot of it is with the director. And the cool part about concept art, I think, is the teamwork aspect of it, because if you're working with talented environment artists, talented character artists, they'll give you like a rough render and they go, hey, here's our character render. What do you think? And I'll paint over it and I'll be like, hey, I think it could look like this. And then they go back and model that and it looks even better, and they come back and they go, oh, check this out. And they go, oh, you know what? We should do this. And then I'll paint over it again. He'll go back and he'll make it even better. And all of a sudden that quality goes higher and higher and higher and higher. The same thing can be done with animators and environment artists. Me doing environments, a lot of times I'll do like a rough sketch and then the environment artist will build it. And I'm like, oh, but then I see something in my head that I go, oh, you know what? I see something now from that. Like, give that to me and let me work on it. You work on it and you give it back to him. And then he's like, oh, you know what? That's gave me an idea. And you kind of just keep going back and forth. And that's what I mean by iterative process. It's never just done one time. And if you have two good artists that work well together, something that kind of happens, it's like chemistry, I guess, team chemistry on a basketball team, right? It starts to become art, right? You start to create something that you wouldn't normally be capable of doing had you had not had that team with you. And usually an art director is good if they assemble a proper team that can work together as a cohesive unit. So when someone is struggling on something, another person can kind of pick up the slack and help them out, and vice versa.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's another great analogy. You can tell Ken likes sports a little bit. But yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, that's what we do. We're a huge part of this team. I would say we're the point guard on that basketball team. But but yeah, and it's one of the things that is so valuable about being a part of a game development process pipeline, or just working in a studio period, is, like you said, you kind of bounce ideas off of each other. You're getting feedback from really skilled professional artists. you're getting pushed by an art director, and so everybody kind of pushes each other, kind of helps each other level their game up. I mean, like they say, there are levels to this thing, you know? And the way that you level up is by becoming a part of a team, and everybody sort of pushes each other, and it will really expedite your growth process. In fact, I would go as far as to say you're probably going to learn as much or more when you get into the industry than you did when you were in school. So, you know, it's a really amazing experience to be a part of a development team, and the growth that it offers to you and to everybody around you. And so that's why it's such a benefit and such a cool gig, because it's one of those things where you're not creating art in a vacuum. You're creating art as a part of a team, and you are going to get better and better every year, and every project that you work on and every new experience is just going to help you learn something new. I can't tell you how many times I've added new tricks and new tools and new techniques to my skill set from things that I've learned from working with other artists like Kalen, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely learn a lot, and that's the beauty of being on a team, is because if you're in a comfortable space where you can offer feedback, there's a lot of times you get tunnel vision where you're sitting down for 4 or 5 hours, 8 hours a day, you're just drawing on something, and then you miss something that you're completely, you completely miss it, and that's what art directors and friends are, where they go, "Hey, can I give you some feedback? I think it'd be cool if you do this." And then, of course, you're like, "I'm an idiot. Why didn't I think of that?" And I mean,
Right.
I still have this sometimes. I have a friend, ironically, that is, I won't name names, but he's developing a black character, right? And he's a white guy, and he's like, "Hey man, like I'm developing this black character, like, but I don't want to mess this up in 2020." And I was like, "All right,
Right.
good. You're already on a good track." And he's like, "Hey man, like, what do you think? Like, can I show you some stuff?" And of course, he's showing me this thing, and I'm like, "Hey man, you should think about these two things." And he's like, "Dude, I never even thought of that, you know?" And he's
Right.
like, "Okay, I'm gonna go back and fix it." And so then the character looked way better, just because he was open minded enough to get someone to offer some feedback, because he's like, "Hey, what am I not seeing?" And that's a really important thing as you grow as an artist. When you're working with other people, when you get into a studio, they're gonna offer you so many just different views or different lanes of things to think about that you never would have thought about, um, as if you were to do it by yourself. And that's why it's really really hard to kind of, it's a lot easier to get better around people. That's why I'm a big fan of community, because you have everyone from different walks of life and just different skill sets that you can kind of absorb their knowledge and bring it into your own work, versus kind of just working by yourself. I mean, which is possible if you're really, really good. But I felt like I got a lot better when I was at studios. Like a good example would be working at ILM, working next to people like Yannick Dussault, who's like one of the best matte painters, where he would just come by my desk and be like, "Yeah, just make a layer and put it at like 30%, make it blue, use this brush, do that, and then like, yeah, put a blur on that." And then I'd just sit there and I'd be like, "What the hell just happened?" Like he just fixed my painting in like 2 seconds. And then you just walk away. And I'm just like, "What? Did anyone just see that?" And you get those little, I call them like nuggets, golden nuggets of information,
Yeah.
where like as you level up, like usually in the beginning, right, when you're first starting out as an artist, everything's a level up, right? Because like you learn, digital painting, you learn the color dodge, you learn this tool, this tool, this tool. So everything's new. But over time, as you get really good, those little things of leveling up are kind of few and far between, because you kind of seen everything now. And so those little nuggets you get from other people, where like they didn't necessarily intentionally mean to give you that information, but you pick it up. And so that's why community is really, really great, because it helps you find more information as you go through, as you get better, in your craft.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that word that you use, community, is huge, because when you are creating art in a vacuum, it's really hard to grow. But when you're a part of a community or part of a team, it will absolutely help you become a better artist. And that's why it's so important that wherever you are, you find a group of people that have the same aspirations and the same interests, and you guys all sort of band together and help each other level up. It'll make all the difference in the world. But one of the things that is important when we're talking about something visual is to show people some visuals. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you guys some visuals of what concept art looks like. And so we're going to show some things on the screen, and I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk about some of these things, and what it takes, what kind of skills. We're going to give you a visual representation of that so you can have a better understanding and be armed with some ammo, when you go talk to your parents or whomever it is that you're talking to about pursuing this career in concept art. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and we'll pull up some artwork and talk about it. Okay, so this first piece, this is not necessarily concept art, but this is an example of digital painting. So one of the core skills of any concept artist is figure drawing, right? That means you have to draw the human figure over and over. You have to draw clothed and nude figures so that you can learn the anatomy. That is absolutely indispensable. In fact, you should be drawing the human figure for the rest of your natural life, whether you are in school or out of school. And as a matter of fact, Kalen knows this because he's worked at places where I'm sure they hire models to come, once a week or once every other week. So after work, everybody can go and draw the figure because you have to keep that sword sharp. But one of the other, I'm sorry, Kate, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's very true. I mean, before the pandemic, I was going to life drawing at least once a week, even as a industry professional. Like, there's always something you can learn.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the craziest things to me is people think that they take those 1 or 2 figure drawing classes and they're like, well, I did that, so now I can move on and be a professional concept artist, like,
It's
whoever.
gonna take me for the rest of my life to understand the human anatomy.
Oh yeah, I've been drawing the figure for 23 years and haven't, still don't feel like I've mastered it,
Well, that was a question I wanted to ask you guys, and I mean, it may be jumping the gun a little bit, but you can't bring a dragon or a goblin into a classroom, right? You actually have to learn how to draw a human being first, and then you extrapolate how things look, correct?
Absolutely.
You're taking stuff from your life experiences, so understanding how form works in the human body, you can then, I always say, learn the rules like a scientist. Like, you're learning every muscle, learning everything about the human anatomy so that you can break the rules like an artist. And so when you're able to kind of learn everything about the real world in terms of how light works, how perspective works, how anatomy works, all these things, once you have a good understanding of things, you can then break the rules essentially, and it becomes art. And so I always say, there's I actually learned this in soccer, being a soccer player, that there's 4 levels to kind of mastery, and it kind of applies to anything. That the first level is you kind of learning the basics. So having a teacher kind of show you hey, this is how you kick a ball, or this is how you draw a circle, or how you draw a cylinder. The second level is kind of learning how it kind of relates to you and your body. So getting your body, the muscle memory down of learning how to kick a ball, shoot a basket, or learning how to draw an arm, right? So someone shows it to you, now you're doing it for yourself, and you're trying to get that kind of mastery down. The third level is essentially becoming professional with it. So now you're able to kind of perform it in a way that you're able to do it at a high level in terms of competitiveness. And then that last level, which most people don't get to, is the artistic level of it, where it's you're now reverse engineering it. And now you're doing things that people are like, what? How did he even do that? And it's becoming art, where it's you make it look so easy that no one can understand, you're developing new techniques. And so a lot of students try to go to that second or third phase really, really fast because they just want to learn, versus learning all this stuff right now, the basics. When I taught this class with Michael knows that the students are man, I want to draw dragons. I want to draw these crazy things. And I'm nah, you're going to draw cubes until you get this stuff right. And the thing is, though, is that once they learn this stuff, they really understand it. Now, when it comes to creating complex things, they now are able to break the rules and do things really, really clever with their drawings that you wouldn't necessarily think of, because they have such a really huge sense of confidence and knowledge of just how the world works around them. So,
now, I remember being in school and drawing cubes and spheres, and that is not easy. You may get one, and that you're oh wow, I got one good. I was well, yeah, 9,999 more to go.
I mean, absolutely. It's definitely one of those things where, you can never just do something once, like those foundational skills like environment drawing, drawing still lifes, drawing, people and things like that, and just say, "Oh, okay, I've been there, done that. I don't have to do that anymore." You really have to continuously do that because it informs and supports your concept art and your design decisions later. You can always tell the people working in the industry who have spent the amount of time doing the foundational things that they needed to, because their figures are really strong. They draw little things like feet and hands really well. And you can tell when somebody probably should have spent a little bit more time drawing those feet and hands, because you can see that in their work. And so it's really important to spend that time on those foundational things, because it's something that will either help you in the future or haunt you in the future, depending on what you do and don't do. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. And figure drawing is super important. You cannot do without it. And another thing is what we have on the screen here, which is digital painting. I mean, you have to learn how to paint digitally. Now, I also recommend, if everyone has the opportunity to take an oil painting class, a traditional oil painting class, that it would really help them and support their digital painting, because the ultimate goal is not to paint in digital painting using nothing but, cheesy digital painting Photoshop shortcuts and techniques. It's to learn how to paint like a traditional painter on canvas, and then translate those understandings into the digital realm. And that's what you're seeing here. What you're seeing here is not, this is not photograph. This is not photo texture. These things are hyper realistic, and they're all painted by hand. And this is how you learn things, is by applying those traditional sort of techniques that you would use on canvas to the digital realm. And that's how you get things that are very beautiful, like this. I mean, what would you say, Kaylin, about the need to learn how to paint digitally as it relates to concept art?
I mean, everything relates to each other. So, I mean, I try to like paint traditionally when I can. I try to draw digitally when I can. I mean, all of it is all about fundamentals, and you'll see a lot of students. When I look at a lot of portfolios, you'll see a lot of like nice one-off pieces, and but then you can tell there's no consistency there. And how you build that ability of consistency is from fundamentals, is from doing this
Hmm.
stuff. I mean, anyone can get lucky and do one good drawing that impresses everybody, but can you do it time after time, right? Like, can you
Right.
put up 20 points a game for an entire season? It's definitely a little bit harder than you think. The same goes with drawing, is that the good artists are the ones that like they just constantly perform. Like I work with people that like I'm like, do you ever have like an off day of drawing, dude? Like you're like always on top of your game, and you can tell that's just because of their fundamentals are just on point. That it doesn't
Right.
matter what kind of pressure they're on, whether it's 2 minutes, whether it's 3 hours, 3 days, what they're going to create is going to be an effective drawing that communicates their idea. And not everyone can do that. And life drawing is really good for that too, just because life drawing to me is about, you're always, if you're doing it from a live model, you only have so much time, so you have a 2 minute drawing, you have 10 minute drawings, you have a half hour drawing, you're an hour drawing. What happens is when you have those time limits, you have to look at the model and figure out like, what don't I need in order to communicate this, because I only have 2 minutes versus 10 minutes versus an hour. And so you learn these fundamentals. You learn to figure out, well, what don't I need to communicate that this is wood? What do I need to communicate this is wood? What do I need to communicate that this is a meat, or a moving box or a wicker basket? You begin to figure out what you need to put in, what you don't need to put in, and that creates that efficiency so that you're able to be faster. And you learn that just by rapid iteration of learning from yourself of like, okay, how do I work and what works best for me? And everyone works very differently, but you have to put in that work in order to figure out, like, going different directions, trying all these different recipes for your art, trying to figure out what's the most efficient recipe to get a good drawing. And that takes a long time, and I'm still figuring that out for me. I'm still figuring out how I can be more efficient. But these things are really, really important to help you get to that part where you're like, I can do something like right away and be amazing at it.
Yeah, and what you said was really important. I mean, you said anybody can do that one off. Like, we all do those paintings where, in a blaze of glory, in a moment of greatness, we created something amazing and we hang it on the wall, and every now and then we walk by it and we touch it and shed that single tear because we're having a difficult time repeating that, what we just saw or what we just created. But consistency is built through repetition, like you said, over and over, pounding away at this stuff that seems to be boring. Because if you can paint stuff like what's on the screen, you can paint a vehicle, a metal vehicle, or a wood, a tree, or whatever. You can paint all of these different things if you can paint this stuff, in a simple fashion like this. And for example, if you can paint portraits like this, for example, you can then obviously paint a character. So the foundational sort of fundamental painting abilities that we all sort of work on in the beginning, and we think, why am I doing this? I want to be a concept artist like this artist or that artist. I want to be a visual development artist like so and so and so and so. And they're doing this other stuff. Why do I have to do this? And the reason why they are where they are, and the reason why we admire them in the way that we do, is because they first did these things for a long time before you ever knew that they existed. And so when you go to somewhere like ArtStation and you look at that first page, I can almost guarantee that every single person on there has put in thousands of hours working on the fundamentals. My father, he used to always say, it only takes 15 years to make an overnight success, right? So we see their work and we think, oh man, they just must have crawled out of the womb and just been handed a paintbrush right there. And from that point forward, it was just greatness. And it's not like that at all. I mean, they spent many years toiling away, figure drawing and doing these paintings and painting portraits and painting cubes before they did any of that amazing concept art stuff that you see in in places like ArtStation or at game companies.
Yeah, that's right. It's a lot of I don't want to say sleepless nights, but it definitely took a while for me to I grinded a lot through college. I didn't do anything else, and I mean, nowadays I work with people and they're like, "Wow, you're so fast," and I'm like, "It's because I've been doing this for a long time." Or they go, "Hey, how did you paint that?" So you're like, "How did you know how to do that?" And I'm like, "I don't know, because I painted it a million times, so now I just know that that's gonna work." And sometimes it comes to that point where you can't even explain it. You're like, I don't really know. I just know that color works with that color, and if you use this brush, it's just gonna work out. And I'm like, how do I know that? It's because I've done it a million times, and this is what I've come to my conclusion. Until someone shows me differently, or until I figure out something, and even then, to this day, I'll be like, let me try this thing and see if this works. And and from just traditional painting and life drawing, all that stuff, it's just again little nuggets of information that you can get that you're like, what, let me try this, and you figure something out. But then again, having friends that are better than you is always great too, because then they'll figure it out for you, and then you just copy them. And then,
yeah,
that's what I do with AJ and AJ Jones. I'm like, all right, I'll let you figure out this new technique, and then you can come back and tell me.
Right, right. So I think what I'd like to do now is, now that we understand the importance of the fundamentals and the basics and grinding, as you put it, and just really repetitiously working on some of these things, I'd like to talk about some of the specific functions within concept art. So I'm going to pull up some environment art. And since you're the environment art master, Kalen, I would love for you to kind of talk about some of this stuff and what it takes to make it as an environment artist, and what the importance of the role of environment art is in the game development process.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of environments, for concept art, we kind of work in two places, whether it's video games or film.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is just to kind of set the mood and the vibe of what you want. So a lot of these right here might be what we call key paintings. And so there may not be any kind of gameplay element or something like that, but it helps establish the lighting, the mood, the look, and the feel. For anyone that's ever traveled to places that have ever put you in awe, you can remember what it's like the first time being there. I can remember the first time what it was like to be in Hawaii underneath like a fall, or at Pillbox where I can see the entire ocean. I can
Right.
remember the smell and the look and the feel. You want the viewer or the audience to be curious, to go like, what is this place? Like, I want to look into it more. And then eventually, once you establish what the look and feel is of these environment, you can get into the nitty gritty details, which might be explaining to the artist, okay, where are these rocks from? Like, oh, they're from Iceland and they look like this. Or explaining, what kind of birds are in this, what kind of foliage grows here, and you start getting into the kind of nitty gritty details. If you're in games, you start thinking about, okay, where does the player start and where do they have to go? And so when you're playing a video game like Uncharted, right, you feel immersed because you're just looking around at everything in the environment and you're like, what is going on? Everything in environments are not by accident. Everything is on purpose. Same thing
Right.
in film too. Everything is put in a way to make you just look at it in a certain way or make you feel a certain way. So, paintings like these, it's we're trying to elicit those feelings of what it would be like if I was there myself, if I was there looking at some crazy structure for the first time. Or like, I think about the first time I ever saw the Eiffel Tower like up close. I was like, what is going on? How do we elicit those feelings of awe and wonderment? I think is really important as an environment artist, for us, I think.
I've got a question for you because on the environment art side, and you were saying earlier somebody just comes to you with an idea. What kind of direction are you given, or what kind of conversation are you having with the art director or the client or the person who's having you do this work? How in depth do these conversations go for you to create something like this?
Well, that really depends on the director. Like right now, I'm working with DreamWorks on some stuff, and I talked to the director producer, and he's like, "Hey man, I got this idea," and he'll start telling me about it, and he's like, "It'd be cool if it did this," and this is why writing things down is like really really important. So whenever I'm meeting with the director or production designer, and they're telling me about something, I am constantly writing down notes, keywords of what they want it to feel like, what colors they're interested in. If I'm lucky, they'll give me reference images. They'll give me things like, "Hey, I took this shot when I was in Gran Canary Islands and the dunes, and there's this nice sand. Maybe do something like that." But sometimes you have a director that's just like, "Hey, just like draw this. Like, I don't know what it looks like. Like, that's your job." So it really depends how in depth the director wants to be. But a lot of times you will get a script. Sometimes if you're working on like an animated feature, you'll get like a script that kind of describes the moment, and your job is to take those words and make it visually. Sometimes you talk to the game designer and they have this idea of this moment that's supposed to happen in the game where it's like this crazy action scene, and you're trying to kind of recreate that moment. And so that's where experiences really really help. I think for me as an environment artist, I've lived abroad, I've lived in Europe and stuff like that, and I've traveled around the world a good amount. So it's been helpful to me because a lot of times I can draw reference or experiences from different places, and they go, "Yo, how did you do that?" And I go, "Oh, it's because I went to this place in Morocco, and I remember seeing this, a few years ago, and it always stuck with me. So I went and got that idea and kind of implemented it in there." Or, "Oh, I was in Hawaii one time, and I remember seeing these kind of like these trees that were kind of crazy. I used that inspiration to kind of create this, alien looking tree." And so that's where it just really depends again on each studio, but more of the times you do get things in written form. But taking notes is really really important. If you take a lot of notes, you can write the words like like kind of the emotional feel that you're like, "Oh, I want it to feel dark or scary. What time of day is it? What kind of materials are in this world? Is this a place where you should feel safe?" Like those kind of hot words you can write. You can put them on the side, and then you go, "Okay, like does this kind of elicit those feelings?" A lot of times, like I'll show that to my wife, because my wife isn't an artist; she's a scientist, and I'll just show it to her, and I'm just like, "Hey, like how does this make you feel?" And then she's like, "I don't like it," and I'm like, "God damn it." But then at the same time, there's something valid, right? Because at the same time, our art is being made for general consumption, right? It's not just for artists, right? I can't just go there and say, "Oh, you don't get it. Like, you're not an artist. You don't understand." There's something valid there. She's like, "I don't like it." Okay, well, I'll go, "Okay, well, she can explain it to me, but I have to go, okay, well, why doesn't she like it?" And maybe it's because of these things, and now I can kind of use that. So sometimes I'll use my wife as a person to kind of be like, "Hey, give me your gut reaction." And then she goes, "Oh, it looks like that." And I go, "Okay, cool. That's exactly what I wanted her to do." So that's kind of a longer answer to how much detail you get. But usually they try to give you as much as they can because they don't want you, because they're paying you and they don't want you to waste money by like drawing the wrong thing like a million times. So hopefully that gives you an explanation.
No, that's great, and environment art is a very important function within games. As a matter of fact, I often see concept artists who can do more than one thing. They can, design characters, props, vehicles, maybe do some environments, but um, but environment artists, those are the ones, environment concept artists are the ones who I see that can really kind of focus in on just doing environment work and be working consistently because it's so important to the game. Because, it seems like, if there's a big franchise, for example, like Tomb Raider or The Last of Us, like the main characters might stay the same. There might be a couple new characters or maybe a couple new villains or whatever, but the environments are always changing because it's a new story. And so it seems to me like the environment artist is probably one of the most important, I guess, roles within the concept art team. What would you say to that?
Yeah, in a way, I mean, it's the hero's journey, you know? It's like you can make a cool hero, but where is he and where is he going to go? Where is he or she trying to go? And so that's where you'll usually have a lot more environment artists in general, like 3D and 2D, because there's so much to kind of like create, especially with like technology being where it is now. Like the PS5 and the PS4, like you can just like I remember playing The Last of Us 2 recently, and I'm like, God dang, like they developed like everything. Like I can walk up to this wall and touch it, and like it's really really nicely rendered. Like this
Right.
grass is amazing. You can tell like a lot of people put a lot of work to create this like immersive experience where it's like I'm in like Seattle, and it's like it's like post-apocalyptic, and I can walk through everything and touch everything. I think a game like Red Dead Redemption is a same similar thing where it's like I literally am in like the West, and so I think for environment artists, again, you just want to create a world. Like you can call it a world builder. You're creating a world. You're creating the culture. You're creating the classes. I was doing a project and I had to create a classes of the city. What do the poor area look like? What do the middle class area look like? What do the rich people look like? What do their buildings look like? And what do they sell? So they're asking me all these questions. I'm like, shoot, I don't know. And so they have to start kind of like doing research, looking at like marketplaces and stuff like that, and then present them ideas like, oh, I think these are the people that would sell this, and I think these are people that would look like this, and so it's a really fun thing, and that's why I'm kind of a big history guy. Like I like things about history and culture, and those kind of things, because all those things can kind of influence you and give you ideas to draw stuff, in the future.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's really important, to have those all that varied knowledge. I always say that concept artists need to learn a little bit about a lot of things, and you have to love history, you have to love architecture, you have to love anatomy, and just be a really knowledgeable person because you have to draw so many things and solve so many problems. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So for example, let's say I'm somebody who doesn't particularly like drawing figures. I just struggle with it so much. It doesn't come easy to me, but I love drawing environments like this. Is it possible for me to work in the industry and be able to do cool stuff like this for a living if I don't, maybe like drawing the figure as much?
Yes, it is, but I would argue that you limit yourself by not doing that, because when you learn, and you can be attest to this, that when you're learning to draw the figure, while you're learning to draw the figure, you're learning a couple of things. You're learning gesture, you're learning lines, you're learning shape, you're learning form, right? You can learn that everything can kind of fit into a box, cylinder, cone, sphere, and you're learning how to combine these simple shapes to make a character, and then you're learning how to light it and render it. The same thing is with environments, right? These trees are just cones, right? They're
Hmm.
cones. This building is just a bunch of different boxes kind of put on top of each other. And so once you realize that drawing characters and drawing environments are kind of the same thing fundamentally, you're just taking shapes and putting them together in an interesting way, and then putting texture and lighting it. once you realize there's not much of a difference, you'll actually get better at your environments from drawing characters and vice versa. And so that you can become a good environment artist, concept artist without drawing characters, but you limit yourself just because I feel like there's lots of that I learned about environments from doing life drawing, from like, oh, like the way that I render like an arm is the same way that I can render a cloud. Who knew? Why? Because the deltoid is kind of like this circular egg thing, and so is a cloud. And so you realize that it's actually the same. But the problem is that we have this like preconceived notion that, oh, I'm drawing a character, so I have this like tunnel vision, and so I have to look like a character. But you're like, no, like if you break it down fundamentally, your vision gets wider, and you're like, dude, it's the same thing. You're just thinking about it. You know what I mean? Like people are like, oh, I can't draw clouds, and I always tell them, I'm like, just turn upside down. And I'm like, why? I'm like, well, draw hills. I'm like, you can draw hills and mountains, right? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, just flip the canvas upside down and draw white hills and mountains. And look at that. Now you have clouds and turn it back, right? Clouds upside down are just like upside down mountains, like, but they're just softer. And they're like, what? I didn't think about that. I'm like, yeah, because you're not thinking about what the shape of a cloud is. You're thinking about it's a cloud versus really breaking it down and understanding the fundamental thing of what makes up the shape of a cloud. And so that's why I say, like, yeah, you could do it, but it's actually a lot better if you try to do other things. So like you should try to do, vehicles or props or whatever. Like if you do environments, there's no reason why you shouldn't do a prop. An environment is just a small portion of a prop is just a small portion of your environment.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's like there should be no reason why you can't do both. But again, like you shouldn't limit yourself from one aspect of the game of concept art. It'd be like me as a soccer player, like I'm only going to work on offense, like screw defense. And it's like, okay, you could do that, but if you were to learn defense, I guarantee you it actually would improve your offense. So it's like you should always kind of know the full set of the game, but then have like your mastery point of like, okay, I know everything about the game itself, but this will be like my thing that I'm really good at.
Right, because if you only focus on offense and no defense, then you'd be James Harden. So
You're a bear. You would throw it in there because you hate that man, but it's all good.
Oh man, you can tell I'm a Warriors fan.
Well, Michael, you had said to me at one point too when you were talking to students about concept art that when they're drawing mechs and they're drawing robots and stuff, they oftentimes draw this massive, giant mechanical beast with little chicken legs, and you're like, you forgot to do your anatomy class this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I have some really cool prop design stuff that I can share with you to show you how it's done right. So for example, this is a student, his name is Han Hao. And by the way, everything that I'm showing on the screen as I'm sharing is all student work. This is all student work from the Academy of Art University, from the School of Game Development. So none of this is professional work. I know it looks like it, but it's not. We just have, that's the level that our students get to when they work really. Touche. Absolutely. It's professional level work. Yeah, absolutely. Any of these people could go out into the industry and get work with a portfolio full of this kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right. But
I just want to say that because sometimes you and me deal with students that are like, I'm just a student, like don't be so hard on me, and I'm like, nah, you're professional now because you need to be like dope now, so when you get out you're already amazing. And then because a lot of students they have that high school mentality. They're like, oh well, I'll try when I graduate. And it's like, no, you should be really good now so that when you get out you'll get recruited into a studio right away. You should treat yourself like a professional right now, that as soon as you get into a school, it's like, I am now professional. I'm now going up against all these people that are really, really good, and I'm not there yet. So therefore, I need to work really, really hard so that I can get to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And having that mindset, having that apprentice mindset, instead of just being, having the student mindset, which is, I work hard to get a good grade, and then when I don't have the pressure or the threat of a bad grade hanging over me, then I'll work sort of half-heartedly or maybe not at all. That's not the mindset of somebody who's going to be successful right out of school. But when you see people who do behave like professionals while they're in school, they usually get out of school and kind of hit the ground running. So it doesn't take long, if at all. Some people get jobs before they even finish school, and it's, that's that's a whole other thing. It's like sometimes they have trouble trying to balance school and work because they're already getting like freelance gigs or studio gigs prior to even getting their degree. So it just depends on like you said what your mindset is. And like you said, like when you see, like you had mentioned, Bobby, when you see this kind of work, what you're seeing is somebody who not only obviously spends a lot of times drawing mechs and props and vehicles and things like that, but they spent a lot of time drawing the human figure so they understand weight and balance and anatomy. So, it's definitely something. I mean, obviously, we've talked about the figure, we've talked about painting, we've talked about environments, and now we've talked about, mechs and props and things like that. And you can see the importance of the fundamentals of painting and drawing all throughout. So there's no way that you can say, hey, I'm going to do this so I never have to do this. Like, it's all part and parcel, and it all kind of works together. And like Kalen said beautifully earlier when he articulated, you can focus on just that one thing, but you'll definitely limit yourself in terms of what you're able to do later on. So yeah, it was absolutely right. I know we've talked about figure drawing a lot, but where it applies most directly is to this. This is character design, and obviously you can see here, you know, right? Those are cool. uh, they look like some futuristic Yeezys. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the anatomy on this character and some of these drawings, like, what do you think about like how much of a part figure drawing has played in the artist's ability to do what you see here?
I mean, the human body is like super complex, and then you combine like fashion, style, and then trying to convey a personality because the drawing can't talk to you. You know what I mean? The drawing
Right.
can't do these things, but we as human beings have been doing this our entire lives, have been looking at someone that we don't know, and within 5 seconds we can size them up as it is it someone I want to date? Is it someone I want to like hang out with? Is it someone that like is scary to me or whatever? You like we do this all the time. We judge in our heads everything about a person just by looking at like one screenshot of them. And so you sometimes, like you said, you only have one time to make a first impression. The
Right.
character has to do that with just one pose. What can we get from this character? You know, is he cocky? Is he athletic? Is he dangerous? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Right. And so all the fundamentals that you learn in life drawing will give you the tools to, in order to kind of convey that to a director. And so that's why life drawing is super, super important because posing and gesture is really, really important. You know, you learn for people that do martial arts or whatever, you can look at someone and go, oh, I think they might be a fighter just by the way that they're standing, you know, by the way that they're kind of looking around and something like that versus, oh, someone's very, very timid, you know, or they're very, very quiet or shy. You know, so facial expressions are extremely hard to do. You could just do a whole class on that if you wanted to.
Right.
But you learn that by learning the anatomy of the face and learning how to squash and stretch it to kind of create personalities. That's why that little personality, the little facial expressions on the top are super important so you can understand like who is this person? Like you're literally creating a soul. You're creating like a person that did not exist yesterday and you're putting on digital canvas. Well, this is a new person, right? And so people are complex, right? We have demons, we have life experiences, all that kind of stuff. You have to literally create all of that, which, by the way, takes 30 plus years to become like who you are as a person. You have to then create that as a drawing. It's really difficult. Like, I don't know how people do it, to be honest. Like, you guys are like
Right.
wizards, to me, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about this particular page is that it doesn't just show this finished piece here. It shows a lot of the iterations. And you see this was like a previous version of this guy. What would you say about the importance of these little iterations here to in terms of the process of getting to this final piece here?
It's all about the money. Like, let's put it this way: if I'm paying you to design me a character, right? If I go up to Michael and I'm like, hey, I need you to draw this guy named Marcus, I do not want Michael coming to me giving me one drawing, right? If I'm paying him a good amount of money, 401k salary, I want to make sure that this rendered painting of Marcus is the best possible Marcus that he could have drawn. AKA, I'm going to have you do a lot of iterations just to make sure there isn't the slightest possibility that there's a better Marcus out there to be drawn, but we haven't figured it out yet. And so iteration is for that as an art director. Like, my job is to milk every creative ounce of juice in your head to make sure that whatever you draw and render is the best possible outcome we could have had, versus giving me one drawing and then I'm like, do I like this? At least now I can look at the drawings and go, okay, like this rendered painting right here to the left is the best possible one out of all these ones that he gave me. Versus if you just give me one, I don't know. I go, well, did you try other things? And they go, oh, I only drew one. It's like, that's, again, you're not an illustrator, you're a concept artist. Our job is to explore and to puzzle solve. And so when you show me the iterations, that's important to me because I go, oh, you know what? Like, we did explore a little bit, and I can look at it and go, oh, you know what? Like, actually, I kind of like that one on the bottom right. I like that jacket. Can we put that jacket on the current design? And at least if the artist is good, they can go, oh yeah, sure. Because of course, like when you deal with executives or whatever, people that have the money, they have like bad opinions because they suck, and they'll be like, hey, it'd be cool. What if we put some spikes on it? And you're like, God damn it! And then you have to go and put spikes on it. But like, you have to be able to like.
I don't see the logo anywhere. Why is the logo not big enough, Kalen? I need
exactly.
A bigger logo.
They'll come in. They'll be like, hey, I saw a survey that like red is like really cool for guys. Can we put red on there? And you're like, why are you here? Like, just give me your money, right? But again, like you have to kind of have that ability to kind of iterate and obviously work and like do what they want, but in a way kind of put in what looks better. Sometimes right. You have to kind of like hypnotize them into like giving them what they want, but still kind of making it like still cool. But yeah, iterations is important for that kind of stuff, because a lot of times it's not, unfortunately, when you get paid, it's not about what you want anymore, which kind of sucks. It's about whoever's paying you. Like, they make the final decision. So you can say, but this is the best one. But if an art director comes back and he's like, hey man, like, no. And you're just like, oh, but come on, right? Like, I had this with my director like last week. I was like, yo, we should do this. And he's like, nah, it's not going to work. And I'm like, dude, it would be really, really cool. Like, I really think we should do this. And he's like, nope. And I'm like, well, like, okay, this sucks. But at the same time, he has a vision as an art director that he can see the entire field, that he has a strategy that whatever I did may not fit in there, and I have to be okay with that, And so you have to remember too that like you're working with other people and you don't always have the final say. And so you have to be able to be a team player and not take it too personally that like your drawing either A, may not get used, or B, get changed. Like, I was doing some freelance and I was like, did this painting and I was like, dude, this painting is amazing. I really, really liked it. And then like literally like yesterday, they're like, we have some changes for you. And they changed it all up, and I was like, oh no, like I really liked it. But then at the same time, like a few days go back later, and I'm like, actually, you know what? They were right. Like, I got caught up like emotionally, and then looking back at it, I was like, yo, they were right. Like, this does look a lot better. So you have to have that ego as well to like be humble about
it. If I'm a young aspiring artist, maybe I'm in middle school, maybe I'm in high school. Or maybe, maybe I'm in junior college and, I'm taking courses in junior college just because I don't know what to do. I always wanted to be an artist, but, my parents said that, it wasn't something that was going to be viable economically. So, if I really want to get into this and make a career like you have, like I have, and like many others have, what's, one good piece of advice that you would give to people aspiring to do stuff like this for a living?
I mean, I would just say that there's a lot of people that choose careers for whatever reason because they think it's going to be easy. And I would say there is literally no career that is like easy, that if you just show up, like you're going to get a job. Like, in terms of like post college, right? Like, there's this weird thing that people go like I have students that go, oh, I want to be a texture artist. And they go, why do I want to be a texture artist? And I'm like, well, because it's easy to get a job. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, if you suck at texture, like, I'm like, who are these people that have all this money that are like, yeah, like, we'll just hire a shitty texture artist? And I'm
Right.
like, dude, if you suck at it, like, you're not going to get a job at that either. And so they think because there are more texture artist jobs that they're more likely to get the work. But I'm like, no, like, you still have to be good. If you are still crappy at texture art, it doesn't matter how many jobs are available. No one's going to want to hire a bad texture artist. And so though there
Right.
may not be as much concept art jobs, doesn't mean that that you're not going to get one if you're not good. You know what I mean? So like if you want to be like a truck driver or a doctor or whatever and stuff like that, like all those things require a lot of like time and effort to get good at them and to be competent at them so that you can be employed. So I would say that don't treat art like it's this thing that, oh, just because I like it and my mom likes my drawings that I'm going to be employed, or that I can't get a job in art. You definitely can, but just know that don't not do art because you think it's like it's a really hard versus do something else. Like everything is going to be hard. So at that point, you should just do what you like. So for me, like I wanted to be like a soccer player. I thought about getting into like other different careers, but art's what I really liked. So I was like, I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? And they're like, well, why don't you just, my parents at some point in time, they're like, well, why don't you just do this? And I'm like, that's going to be equally as hard. There's no guarantee that I'm going to get a job in that either. So I might as well do what I'm into. You know what I mean? Because at least if I do what I'm into it, then I don't mind going to school every single day for like 20 plus hours and all I do is just draw and live, eat, and breathe it versus, being a scientist, something like that. You know what I mean? Like, pick what you're into, then you won't mind putting in the extra work. And I think that's kind of my idea. And that you can be successful in all aspects. And again, there's no guarantee that you're going to be successful just because it's not art. Like, I know plenty of like scientists that don't work because it's like a science. I know plenty of doctors that aren't working. I know plenty of lawyers that aren't working. There's no guarantee that, oh, because I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, like I'm gonna like make money and whatever. I know plenty of like real estate agents. Like it's competitive all throughout. Like there's a level of grind you have to do. So don't think that you're gonna get into art because it's easy, because it's definitely not.
Yeah, I know plenty of nurses that are driving Uber right now. Because it's like you said, it doesn't matter. I mean, especially in a time like this, it's really challenging just to get a job, period. So, yeah, if you're going to pursue something like this, pursue your passion, but pursue it with gusto. And probably, I mean, so we've talked about the foundational skills that you need of just a strong command of line and value and the basics and drawing the figure, the intermediate skills, just kind of understanding design, the design process, and then, the advanced skills, which are just those that problem solving ability that you see here, where, you're able to take somebody's idea and work through it, iteratively to be able to come up with something really cool in the end. And I guess maybe the one thing that we neglected to talk about was, the soft skills, which I like to always mention because just having professional etiquette and, being able to relate to people in a healthy way, in a respectful way, and just being a cool person, it just goes a long way. I mean, one of the things that I always admire about Kalen is this guy literally knows like every single concept artist in the industry. I don't know that there's one that he doesn't know. He gets along with people really well. He makes friends really easily, and just kind of connects with people because he's such a people person, and just a great guy, really cool, and a lot of times, that will turn out to be really cool projects that you'll end up working on because somebody will call, they'll think of, hey, I need a really cool environment concept artist who, hey, you know what, call Kaylin. You'll be one of the first people that come to their minds because people want to work with people that they like, people that they get along with, people that are cool. So soft skills are really important. I mean, you could be the most awesome concept artist in the world, but if you're a jerk, your opportunities are going to be limited solely for the fact that you're a jerk. Kaylin knows this. I know this. There are people in the industry who trust me when I say they are freaking phenomenal. But if I had the opportunity to hire somebody, they would be the last person on my list just because I don't like the way that they act. And I mean, it's Yeah, it's really important. I mean, what would you say to that, Kalen, before we jump
I
off?
mean, again, you're the sports analogy, right? You're making your team, right? You can have the star player, but if he's super toxic and no one wants to work with him and everyone hates him, then sorry, my dog is about to bark for a second. Toby, don't even think about it, buddy. If you he's sorry, my dog's getting crazy. Um, you know, you can have, when you're creating your team, you want your team to work as a unit. It's a big machine, all the cogs are working. When you bring someone into that cog, that machine, that studio, you want to know that they're not going to hold things up. They're not going to make people mad. They're not going to be very toxic. They're not going to have make people hate them, because they're going to be spending a lot of time with these people. And so to me, I think the most important thing is level of respect. You don't have to have the same hobbies. You don't have to like the same music or whatever. But there needs to be a level of respect, and it's a level of being able to work together towards a common goal. And so a lot of times you can get an artist that it's all about him. It's all about what he wants to do or what he thinks is important, and kind of ignoring everybody else, making everyone else's job harder. Well, it's like, okay, he's not worth that trouble. At
Right.
that point, we can just hire him as a freelancer, I guess, and then he could be by himself and not annoy anybody. But in terms of bringing him into a project, I don't want to deal with that guy. We've had that issues before, or someone's really talented and they go, Kalen, this guy's really talented, but man, his attitude is this guy's an asshole. And I'm like, God dang it. And I'm like, bro, stop being a dick. I could get you work, but because you're a dick, no one wants to work with you. And then it's just well, man, F them, it's all them. And I'm like, all right then, dude, be unemployed. I don't know, but then don't complain to me later when you can't get stuff. So I mean, do what your parents taught you. Be nice and be empathetic and don't be mean. I think it's just don't be mean.
Right.
And unfortunately, we live in a time of social media where your hot takes on controversial issues will probably not work out for you in terms of helping you get work. But if overall you're an empathetic person and you want people to live and be happy and that kind of stuff, chances are it will reflect good on you. But if you're the kind of person that's toxic, always arguing with people, always just kind of being mean, that stuff can affect you. I mean, I've seen it happen on social media. I've seen it happen. People, they're just their attitudes. People look at that and they're like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think I think whoever has stumbled upon this talk and watched it, you've dropped some real gems, some really important knowledge, and just some good stuff here. I mean, if I were an aspiring concept artist, I would be very happy to have attended this talk and learned some of these things.
What are some of the skills outside of just artistic skills? Something somebody should start thinking about, studying, getting involved in to be a good concept artist?
Just be curious about the world, and how things are. I mean, growing up, I was pretty not say conservative, but pretty I lived in my own little bubble. I thought the world worked a certain way, and it wasn't until I moved abroad and met people from different cultures and stuff like that, I learned that my preconceived notions of what I thought certain religions or cultures acted like were not that. And I learned the differences, to appreciate differences, and also to appreciate similarities in certain things. And so I think all that kind of stuff, and just being curious about the world and being curious about people and not being judgmental, um, can will really, really help. I mean, me being able to travel the world and have friends all across the world has really, really helped me in terms of coming into drawing with an open mind and taking many things from around the world to kind of put in my environments, which I wouldn't have if I was closed minded. So I would just say, just be really open minded to people that you may not understand. And a good saying is, don't be curious, be judgmental, ask questions. The more you can ask questions about things you don't understand, the more you can come out of it with better understanding, more empathy. And I think that honestly will add to your artwork and make you more of a quality artist.